that is the entire population of Turkey. And they're going to add it in 2 years. When you talk here about adding 10 million new phone subscribers a month, you know, that's half the population of the country I come from. And you add it on a monthly. And so that is going to lead scaling, innovation, and new ways of looking at businesses. And then my last point, mobility will be the platform. And as Sunil clearly demonstrated it, and that's how mobility is going to change the way people live, play, learn, and work. And then lastly, that managed and hosted services will connect rural areas. We have the obligation as business leaders to create jobs in the rural areas. We can't just urbanize the whole world. And we are going to look at these type of initiatives, and we hope to be a partner in that to get it developed. So Cisco as a company is good to look at market transition, and you can't read this slide. Don't try to. But if I look at the market transitions we gave in 1997, and we basically said that everything will be connected. We also said voice will be, initially we said free, but that costed us a lot of business with service providers because they didn't like that. It, over one night, costed us $10 billion of market cap. We now say voice will be commoditized. It will be just one application in a total suite of services. But what we are learning now, everything is connected, and currently we estimate around the world that 14 billion devices will be connected. That's triple the world population. And this number is going to extrapolate even faster. It will be 50 billion devices connected in half the time that it took to go to 14. And it will accelerate. And so it will explode. So everything will be connected, and I think you will be with me. But I think what we're learning now is that it's going to be about emerging countries. Emerging countries, and you see that here in the middle. It's just one statement, but think about what that means. Emerging countries are going to lead the innovation. Coming out of the Western world, having worked and lived 10 years in California, that's a discovery. And for a lot of people, it will create initially some resistance. And you know, when you have resistance, things go slower and things turn hot. And you will see some defensive type of... I see it as an opportunity. I see the glass half full. What we're also learning is that it's not so much about technology anymore, it's about business models. It is about what Sunil talked about software as a service. Everything will become a service over the net. And it is that multi-service aspect where we need business leaders to dream about it, to think about it, and how they can implement it. It's going to be a connected life. It's going to be an experience. So the point I tried to make is that if emerging countries lead innovation, what does that mean for Western companies? And let me give you that perspective. And so for us, for Cisco, it meant that we came to India. And that we basically said, we are going to build here our second head office. And not just for the market, but for the environment, for East. Why did we choose India? Very simple. You should be proud. This is such a diverse country. It's a democracy. It has values. It's a value-based society. And we are really pleased and proud that we have the ability to work and live here. You know, I can say a lot of companies have India in their head. I dare to say that we have India in our heart. And I'm very proud. I have my management team here around. We have a very diverse team with people out of the US, people out of China, people out of the UK, out of the Netherlands, even out of Belgium. That's a joke between the Dutch and the Belgians, if you get it. It's a very global team. And what our mission is to get the innovation, the scaling, to learn together and see how we can make a technology company that can change the way we work, play, live, and learn. Also, if you look at the proximity, and this is, Mukesh, and thanks for your address on global leadership. My leader, my boss, and friend, John Chambers, he is a command and control type of leader. Now imagine that he gives us the flexibility to start building a head office in this side of the world. And it's beautiful. It's 12.5 hours away. And that means that when he sleeps, we can rule the world. And the other way around. But that whole transformation of going from command and control to collaboration and teamwork, and to empower teams and people, and to get different leadership values. Technology can support it, but it's the leadership who has to drive that. And that is a big responsibility that we share together, and to bridge the worlds, and to really start looking at East and West. We're doing things together. And we can do those type of things together, technology enabled. So I want to give you a couple of examples of transformational opportunities from a technology point of view. And this is a technology, we call it telepresence, and because the killer application is going to be video. And we have a lot on the phone now, and we do a lot of things, but, you know, physical is still the best, isn't it? Like this type of conclave. Talk about it, have a glass of wine together, or water, or juice, or have dinner together and talk about things. The second best is being together via technology, telepresence. And these are rooms that we are building and where we communicate. What I learned is that we come in these type of rooms and we say, wow, that's great technology. So we had our kids. And they come in these type of rooms and they don't expect less. The moment they come in, they start playing. They start communicating. It's like Sunil said. The point I tried to make is that consumers and young people will drive the needs of enterprises. And that's another inflection point. We never had that. And so as families living here in India, and with 20 families, 50 kids, all the stories that come home, that's where you learn. So the youth, the consumers, are going to drive the needs of enterprises. And here you see an example of how we use telepresence internally. At John Chambers, on an analyst meeting, looking at these 3 screens where people, we call it TP in. And where you have questions out of the audience, and if you can say, so, Owen Chen in Beijing, what do you think? Or Rob Lloyd in New York, what do you think? Real time, simultaneously. Also, we had a big acquisition, WebEx. And normally an acquisition for Cisco, and it is already relatively fast, you know that, 45 days. But this was a $3 billion acquisition that we did in 8 days, technology enabled. And because we could communicate, talk, work, travel, and at the same time. Can you imagine the type of productivity improvement? And not to insult anybody, but our legal team at the moment is one of the most productive teams. Because using technology, having everything online, patents, contracts, legal, they have been able to lower the fees by 5%. By just communicating better and collaborating better on a global basis. My own business in services, I plan 10-15% productivity improvement every year. And that's how I maintain my margins and can do better for our customers. Telepresence also, it's going to be pervasive. At the moment it's boardroom. But we start getting medical applications, by which you start doing telemedical, because the quality is so good that you can look at skin colors, you can look in the pupils. And it's going to change the way Medcare is done in rural areas. We have to meet the price points. Don't get me wrong, but we'll learn that here in India. Secondly, I'm one of the first, I am the first executive in the world who has telepresence in his house. And when I came living here, and my wife is here, and I said, we're going to give up the family room to have telepresence. She said, I don't know whether I like that. Now you see the picture next to that. That is my wife. And the proof point is here. So, that's because it is changing the way we work, live, play, and learn. Because early in the morning, I take TP calls with the US. I don't have to go to the office. I don't commute to compute. We can't just urbanize and build roads everywhere in the country. There are different ways of working. So this will stimulate different ways of collaborating, different way of working. So it is going to be at the consumer side, because telepresence will be a $1,000 box 5 years from now. And probably in 7 years, it will be just what we call board in a set-top box. So everything will be connected. People will start interacting at any way and form, also with video. Also think about the rural areas, Medcare, but also think then about illiteracy. And that if you can talk, you don't have to type. It can change the whole way, and you get an inclusiveness that we haven't seen yet. Over 30,000 virtual meetings have been done, and we use it everywhere. It's pervasive. This, for me, makes really the point. And then we opened our campus in October 2007. We invited Professor Kalam, who we all respect, of course, to open our campus. And he said, Wim, that's great, but then I want to understand your company better. I'm going to travel to California to see your engineers, to talk to them, to understand your culture, that we can collaborate. So normally I would have traveled with him then to California with a couple of people together. He went alone. And you see here, he's sitting here in California with John Chambers. And I'm sitting on the other side, in the middle there, next to my Chief of Staff and our President of India, in my house in Bangalore. We have Laura Ibsen sitting in Washington. So what you see here is collaboration without travel. So it saves a lot of money, it increases productivity, but more and more important, it enables also green initiatives. If we have 200 rooms at the moment now, and we have saved 20% of our travel cost, that's great. But also, if you look at the carbon dioxide that we saved, it's the equivalent of 6,000 cars off the road. And so thinking transformationally how technology can enable new business models, it can serve a lot of opportunities. Virtual reality. We did this in Bangalore in October. This is virtually beaming in a person. So like last night, Clinton, wasn't that, stimulating? And, isn't that great? Imagine that you could project him here on stage. And it's 5-7 years out. It will change the way we do business. It will change the way we learn, live, and play. If you think about the transformational opportunities in countries, urban and rural, if we go to developing countries in Africa, you start talking to government leaders about a holistic plan. How do I educate my people? How do I bring healthcare? How can I create jobs? And how can I connect to the world? It's all about connectivity. It's all about how to create a better life for your citizens. So it's infrastructure, application and services. It needs a holistic approach. And that's what, my observation of India is, with CIIs, with NESCOM, all these institutions to try to solve something together. As an outsider, you should be very proud of that. I haven't seen a lot of countries who really do that. Smart cities. 500 million people will be urbanized. We're building, and I'm on the board in Saudi Arabia, smart cities, where we think beyond the physical infrastructure. We think about connectivity. Connectivity will create entertainment, but it also will create healthcare opportunities, where you have, and security, all kinds of new services. It's going to be services with complete new business models. Who is the tenant? Is it the developer? Is it the service provider? Is it government? Our conclusion, it has to go all together. It has to go in collaboration. Rural transformation, probably the biggest, I would say, duty we have as leaders. How can we get inclusive growth? It starts with government services, and India is leading in that. E-governance around the world in India is a fantastic initiative, and it is in execution mode. Education and healthcare. But on top of that, if we have those basic things in place, via initiatives that Makesh talked about it, how to improve supply chains, how to disintermediate all kinds of middlemen to get initiatives from farm to fork. Connectivity can help. Bring jobs to the rural areas, like rural BPO. You see all these initiatives starting. We have a learning initiative. We have 170 academies in India now. We work with NIIT together. And I love to address these type of leadership classes in the rural areas. I was there yesterday, and I asked the 25 students, if you are graduated, what are you going to do? And 23 said, we are going to the bigger cities. And I said, who can come up with a business plan to stay here and to create jobs in a circle of 25 kilometers? We have the duty as leaders to bring jobs to the rural areas. Foundational utilities, that's where I want to leave you with a thought and wrap up. We are used and we are educated to think in water, electricity, and transportation. Transportation specifically, we think in roads, we think in airports, and we think in harbors. And we all know in India that we have to catch up. It's incremental. I want to address you as business leaders. Think connectivity and communication as the fourth utility. Think about connectivity as a complete new utility that you can enhance in your business plan. And think about the transformational opportunities it creates for a country, it creates for businesses, citizens, and specifically development and inclusive growth for rural areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elfrink. Thank you, Mr. Mittal. I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that both our speakers have opened up our eyes and minds to the rapid advances that communication technologies that is happening in communication technology and how it will change the way we live and work. Before starting the Q&A session, I'd like to make one cheeky comment on what Mr. Mittal said. He wants to sign up on Facebook anonymously. Just for his information, one of his peers is already on Facebook, not anonymously. That is Anand Mahindra, and you can poke him in Facebook lingo anytime you want, or even send him risque videos. So I'd encourage you to sign on in your real name. I'd like to ask the first question to Mr. Elfrink. Mr. Elfrink, you're the Chief Globalization Officer for Cisco. Why did you choose to base yourself in India and not, say, anywhere else?
That's a question that we get, of course, oftenly. And specifically, let me be a little bit provocative, why India, why not China, for instance? And, let me be very crisp on that. We do more business in China than we do in India at the moment. But if I compare that and I say, the business we do with India triples the business we do with China, because India is very export-oriented. ICT in India is an export product of 40 billion that probably will scale quickly to 100 billion. We see India as the basis for globalization. A cooperative government, a democracy, talented people getting still younger, well-educated, a nation based on diversity and a growth culture and history will create unprecedented opportunities next to the geographical proximity out of India. With a 5-hour flight, you can reach 70% of the world population. And Nandan Nilekani always says, then we need some more flights. But that will come. And we will need some more airports, but that will come. And so the potential together combined with protection of intellectual property, that makes it an easy choice.
Thank you. May I now call for questions from the audience? Ma'am.
My name is Yashodhara Raje, and the presentation that you both gave was exciting for somebody who is not in business, but in the political field. My question is one removed from what you are doing, but yet it's connected to you. Both of you work through hardware, whether it's the mobile telephone or whether it's the PC or the laptop or the computer. With all the green initiatives that we talk about, and with every one of us here in this room, somewhere in the back of our minds thinking about the environment and all that's going on with climate change and the environment, what are you all doing to the wastage that comes off of these electronic handsets, computers, laptops? Is there some initiative being taken by your companies into going into the research of how you can take care of this waste management? Because people like us are using 2233 telephones, 2233 laptops. You're talking about initiatives. Every second of the day, a new laptop is coming out with new hardware. A new telephone is coming out with new hardware. We throw our old telephones and laptops away. And it's scary to think, what is happening to that wastage?
Mr. Mittal, would you like to take the question? Or
Well, I think it's a very important point, and electronic garbage, as you have described, is an important issue that is facing the whole world today. India has actually started to use devices only now, and of course lots of them because we have a large population. We are still not at a point where we are generating that much of garbage because of reuse in India. It's hands me down, it's still happening. Old computers are still going into villages, into schools and all. But yes, we are coming to a point where it's going to get a serious problem, especially with all the chemicals on the printed circuit boards and all the electronic components which go in there are going to create a lot of hazardous waste out there in the marketplace. To a specific question, are the telecom companies or technology providers doing anything about it? The state of the answer is only those equipment that are with us are being managed when we dispose them off. But the millions or hundreds of millions of devices in the marketplace are not in our reach. I would say neither in Cisco's reach in that sense. But collectively, I think you were raising an important point. The country will need to engage with it.
If I may add, I would say three things. First, fundamental R&D. That's to reduce power consumption, to use better materials. That's a company initiative. It is a company board. That's green initiative in general. So that's one. Secondly, then recycling. That's to see what we can reuse. And there are a tremendous amount of opportunities. But then thirdly, the one I mentioned also in my presentation, look at different ways of doing business. But do we really have to travel? Do we really have to go to the office? In my Western world and also coming here to India, I do a lot of work from home. I always say don't commute to compute. Go to the office to meet people, to meet employees, to meet customers. If you want to work, why should you travel? And so for me there are three things. It is a different way of designing your equipment, much more with green in mind. Secondly, the recycling. But thirdly then, the different ways of how we work.
I'll just add to that one point on a lighter note. This morning when me and Wim were sitting, he said, I wish I could have done teleporting off Clinton last night, which will happen in 2-3 years. So Mukesh could have been here standing virtually and not travel today, this morning. But equally, most of you delegates need not be here. You could just be transported in your chairs. The only problem is what happens to the dinner plate. I don't know if it's good for Arun or bad for Arun, but that's going to happen.
quick, please.
Coming out of a conclave like this, y'all could make a decision while y'all are sitting here, because y'all are now leaders. Before, you used to look on politicians as leaders, but I see more and more that it's business that's now providing the leadership. So from a conclave like this, it would be one of the most amazing steps that when you get out of this room, both of you form a pool of people who could get together and say, okay guys, tomorrow let's get together and think about what she said today and do something about it, rather than just, dialogue.
Thank you. Jay Panda.
My question is to Sunil Mittal. Thank you for that vision that you spelled out, and I have no doubt that you will continue to play a leading role in making that vision happen as you have in the past. My question to you is to play devil's advocate for a minute and anticipate some of the hurdles that will undoubtedly come up in translating that vision into action. Now, you've mentioned one hurdle, which is regulatory hurdle, which will delay your transgression, as you called it, into banking. What are some of the other hurdles, and how do you plan to anticipate and tackle them?
Well, I think, like Mukesh also, I try to look at the final position rather than hurdles. But one has to, as you are rightly pointing out, deal with the hurdles. And yes, I would never want to be regulated by one more regulator. Having been regulated by one is enough. And RBI, my God, never, no. Now, to your point, what else is still in the play which has got to be settled? I think the vision that you saw here predicates very heavily on broadband. And broadband can be delivered two ways. You can either physically wire the country, or you can provide it through the air. I don't think so we're going to get to a point where we'll wire this country anymore. We stopped putting fixed lines 8, 9, 10 years back. We were at 40 million. We are still at 40 million, if not less. A bit of copper here and there is being laid out, but that's not going to happen. New clusters, new blocks, suburbs, rural areas will never see a copper line. Some fibers on the main arteries are there, but they need to be pulled into the customer premises. Again, not a possibility. So what do? You have to do this through wireless. The good news is 3G HSPA is alive and kicking, and now become a reality. 80-90 million customers are on board. You will have several hundred million by the end of next year. India is really delaying this piece. 3G HSPA needs to come to India, I would say, ahead of even the Western nations, because they are connected, either through a cable or a wire. India is not. We need to put out our 3G services into the country today. And the technology exists, the price points are great, affordability is there. I hope that this last bastion on which the government is still debating, discussing, will be put out for auction of 3G spectrum, after which about 6-8 months later you will see broadband services across the country. To my mind, we are 2 years late, can't afford any more delay. That, to my mind, is the biggest challenge in front of the industry today.
I can't see him, but I'm told he wants to ask a question. G. Krishnan, please.
Yeah, Mr. Mittal, I have a question for you. Thank you very much for that lovely presentation from both of you. I'm right here. Jai Panda obviously beat me to that, but my question to you is on issues relating to regulators. We see that in our business, we face this all the time. I heard Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad in the previous session ask Mr. Mukesh Ambani a question about how do business leaders and political leaders work collaboratively. And the answer of Mr. Mukesh Ambani is very simple: trust. And I notice that trust, when a politician turns into a minister, that trust goes away. What, according to you, you obviously lead one of the leading communication company and also lead several industry bodies. What, according to you, should be the advice to all those sitting here in terms of those who are present leaders and those who could be future business leaders? What should they do to try and make the politicians realize that they should not regulate us? And how should they work on trust?
Well, I would go to the extent of saying that regulation is bad per se, because you need rules of the game. For anything that you will do in the marketplace, you will have to have rules of game, otherwise there will be chaos. And especially in areas where there are not infinite resources, and therefore you will need regulation. But the regulation needs to be light touch. There are great models around the world, Oftel, FCC. We need to follow light touch regulation. And that happens out of trust. That happens out of, I would say, the political establishment having more trust. And I would say that again after what Mukesh said. I think this country and the politicians and the policy makers are much bolder today than 89, 90. But they need to probably go a lot longer in putting the trust into the hands of the private sector. Because in the last 12 or 15 years, a great deal of demonstration exists that has not been failed. The trust that they have reposed in the industry and the private sector has rewarded this country. It will reward more if we go forward. In my own analysis, government are today great enablers. I think they have moved from becoming an obstruction to becoming enablers. That is a given. They are poor executors. They really need to get out of execution. And that is where the public-private partnership needs to come in. Execution in the hands of public sector or government can never be as efficient as a public-private partnership where public regulates, public directs, has a policy touch, but the private sector executes.
Gentleman there with the mic, behind please.
As a Suketu Shah here, as a follow-up to the brilliant question that Yashodhara Raje asked, there doesn't seem to be adequate, I think, thinking that has gone into the disposal aspect. Similarly, I wonder how much thinking is going into the health aspect of the devices you're talking about. You're talking about 50 billion devices being connected and billions of others. I just wonder how much research is really going into these, where you're staring into these cathode ray tubes, what it does to your frontal lobes, what it does to the rest of your, to your body. So I just wonder if both of you would like to comment on that.
I'll make a short comment on this. At least in the mobile industry, there have been, I would say now, over 100 very deep studies of are there any health hazards in using a mobile phone. The fact is the power consumption in the devices has gone down next to nothing. If you look at the old clunky mobile phones, the amount of wattage of power consumed while idling or making a call was probably 100 times more where we are today. These devices are getting small, the transistors are getting smaller by the day, devices are consuming less and less power. I would, since I'm in this industry, I think I have a vested interest in saying it, but I can tell you, when my children use these phones, I'm not worried, because I know there's enough studies which have been done to suggest that there is no more damage from a mobile phone than a light bulb, for example. Now, are light bulbs going to damage? Is going to create some radiation? Of course they do. Now, are they going to mutate the human bodies into something else? I'm not a competent person to answer. But I follow and track the developments around this industry very closely, and I can tell you the only way you can make it safe is to continuously ensure that the wattage usage on your radio, all sorts of radio devices, is minimized. But we may have some issue on that.
Yeah, I think in general, from a business perspective, we have gone from almost ignorance to awareness. We're now in the mode of developing action plans, but in the end it's about execution. And I felt dramatically energized at the World Economic Forum this year again, where there was a business session together with the political leaders and with the academic world in general to come up with executional plans. So Kyoto is going in the second generation next year in Copenhagen. The Prime Minister of Denmark is leading the initiative, and business now starts to lead, to come up with actionable initiatives. And I think only via collaboration between the academic world, the political world, and the business world, in which the business world is now going to take its responsibility to lead these initiatives, you will see executional plans who will bring us to the responsibility that we have to take.
I'm afraid we are running out of time. We can take just one last question. Gentleman out there.
Admiral Prakash. One of the underlying themes that has come out clearly this morning is that there is a higher purpose to business, and that market capitalization should not be the only index of success. And everybody's brought out that businessmen should have a social conscience, and you should be aware of people's aspirations, poverty alleviation, etc., etc. Of course, apart from the fact that if you have a social commitment, it also benefits business. If people at large are more prosperous, there's more business. So the crunch will come when you are asked by the government to show affirmative action. So, Mr. Mittal, can we have your thoughts on reservations for the less, for the deprived sections of society in private industry? Thank you.
Well, if your specific question is only on the piece of reservation as a question, let me respond to that. This debate, as you know, has been raging for some years now. Should there be reservation in the private sector of, in particular, SC/ST candidates? And my view is, you legislate something, you're not going to get the right results. The total organized world in India, the industry has 8 million jobs. I think somebody needs to remember this data point. There are 8 million jobs in the corporate sector. Even if the corporate sector is growing at a blazing 10%, you know what will that do to the employment. It's not going to resolve the issue or the raging controversy of lifting the people from the abject poverty or socially segmented classes. Having said that, at CII and all its members, we decided to do a code of conduct for ourselves, and we said voluntarily we'll start doing certain things that will be participative in this particular area. My own company, for example, has finally, after four attempts actually, the problem is the Ministry of Social Justice does not have a strong data bank. We have finally picked up 70 SC engineers in Madhya Pradesh who are under training just now. The next batch of 250 will now happen in the next few months. All these people are being trained, they are engineers, but they need to go through finishing in telecom and other related activities, and will be employed. So my company is, I would say, far out into this area and voluntarily moving a lot of the stuff. But if you ask me, am I in favor of a roll call in my industry to say who's SC/ST, my answer is a clear no. If you go to my canteen, there's no division there. I mean, I don't want to create the division that I am an SC/ST and a backward class and therefore got to have separation in the company. I will be opposed to that. By the end of the day, I think this is what the politicians have to decide. 8 million jobs in the organized sector. You put a reservation of a certain kind, you're not going to get a result other than a tokenism, which may have the impact of destroying meritocracy in the Indian industry.
Thank you, Mr. Mittal. Thank you, Mr. Elfrink. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. May I now request the Editor-in-Chief of the India Today Group, Mr. Arun Puri, to come up on stage, please.